Welcome to Whisperwood Stories. Today, we read 2 stories from r/letsnotmeet. Let's begin. Our first story is from Hebiazart. So a robbery turned into me almost getting kidnapped. Hi, my name is Alexandra. I live in France, and 3 years ago, when I was 13, I almost got robbed or kidnapped during a robbery. First, I'm going to say some of the laws in France, for everyone to understand the story better. In France, weapons of any type are not allowed. Guns, knives, etc. You can have them at home, only knives. Guns are strictly illegal. But you can't go out with weapons. Second law, self-defense, is authorized only if the threat is high, like in this story. Keep these facts in your head, and let's begin. So I was alone at home. My parents and brother were at the cinema. I'm a quite stressed person with depression problems and anxiety problems, etc. So since I'm a little bit crazy, I always have a pair of scissors beside me, even in bed. I thought that I would never get used to it, but I did. I was watching something on my computer around 9:30 p.m. when I heard some weird banging noises in a rhythm. Like I said, I'm often a stressed person, so I thought that it was just me being crazy. I continued watching videos, and 10 minutes later, I heard some glass being broken outside of my home. I live in a house with others that aren't near mine, so I got up to check, and I saw through my window the weirdest and scariest thing ever. I saw 2 people, armed with knives, trying to get into my house by the park. I have a park beside my home. And at that moment, I realized that the glass broken was the glass table in my garden. So I backed up in fear. I didn't know if the robbers had seen me because they were scaling the fence between the park and my home. I rushed into my room and grabbed my pair of scissors. At that moment, I wanted so bad to call the police, but my portable phone was out of battery, and the other phone has a loud sound when it's picked up. Suddenly, I had an idea. I have an alarm that has an SOS button, so I clicked on it. The problem was that my alarm was in my living room, and I have windows everywhere in the house. So when I clicked on it, I was visible to the robbers. So the worst thing happened, and they saw me. I never shouted so loud in my entire life. After I shouted at them to go away, which in my opinion wasn't very convincing, they tried to open the back door. It's a door with a window on it. Luckily for me, when I'm alone at home or I'm going to sleep, I check every door to see if they are locked or not. So the back door was locked too. I don't know why they didn't break the glass. They probably thought that 2 sounds of breaking glass would be too weird, I'm not sure. So when I saw them trying to get in, I panicked. And I pointed my scissors at them, yelling, "I called the police. Go away. I have weapons, and I'm going to use them." They backed up from the door a little, but my nightmare wasn't over. They weren't scared of me, because they had knives too. So they pointed their own knives at me through the window to scare me. To be honest, it worked. After re-shouting that I called the police like 5 times, they started to go away. And they saw that the back door wasn't opening, even after shoulder bashing it. When they were going away, one of them looked at me and smiled. So to this day, I don't know if they were just robbers or if they were kidnappers who knew that I was alone. So, robbers or kidnappers, let's not meet. Our last story is from Boyfriendsweaters. That time I got locked in a room with an unsettling man. When I was 18, I worked at my college's residential building at the front desk, and I think I almost got assaulted or murdered. You be the judge. During the summer, the building operated as a hotel. So 2.5 floors were hotel rooms, and half of the 3rd floor were student rooms. The whole building operated with a hotel swipe key system that was pretty outdated, and all the doors were powered by 4 AA batteries. If the batteries died, there was a decently lengthy process to replace them and reprogram the door. A dark-haired guy came to the front desk from the inside of the building while I was working an overnight shift, around 1 to 2 a.m. He said he left his keycard in his room. I made him a new one, and made my first error of the night. Hotel guests could have as many room keys remade as they wanted, hypothetically. Students, however, were supposed to be given a temporary keycard and charged $2 to be returned later. I gave him a new key for his room and asked if he was a student or a hotel guest. And he replied, student. At this point, I should have checked our system to charge his account, but I was caught up by doing administrative duties and forgot. I used to trust people way too easily at this job, but quickly learned not to. Later on in the night, maybe around 3 or 4 a.m., he came to the desk again and said that he couldn't get into his room. I asked if he just forgot his key again, and he said no, the door wasn't working. I asked if the light was coming on when he swiped his card, and he said no. So I figured that the batteries were dead. I told him that I'd have to change the batteries, and I went up to his room with him. He asked for my name, and I told him. He didn't tell me his. I opened the door manually with the master key and told him that I'd have to prop it open while I worked on the back panel to replace the batteries. He said, no, it's okay, I'll close it, and closed and deadbolted the door locked. Really weird, but I tried not to think about it. I had changed the batteries on plenty of other doors by this point, and some students were iffy about having their doors propped open for their room to be on display for anyone walking by. He also had a really thick accent, and I thought that he might be an international student, since we had a lot of students from out of countries where English was not their first language. I gave him the benefit of the doubt and thought that it was also just a language barrier issue. At this point, though, I really felt like something was wrong, but I tried to ignore it so I didn't freak him out. While I was trying to focus on fixing the door as quickly as possible, he kept trying to entice me to go further into the room, saying his bed was broken and he needed me to take a look at it. There was something underneath it that needed to be fixed, etc. He held out a little gold house key and said, I have a key, go get it, and threw it under the bed. He said that there was a leak under the fridge. He just kept trying to get me down on the ground, throwing random problems at me. Obviously, I told him no. I'd send maintenance up in the morning to take a look at it if anything was broken. I had my back to him and he asked me if I would take off my glasses. I said no, I need them to see. His tone of voice changed, and in the most steady, chilling manner he said, "Ella, it's okay. You can take them off." And from behind me, he reached around and tried to take off my glasses. I swatted his hand away, and trying to remain composed, said, "No thanks, I need to keep them on." Even though he was creeping me out, I didn't want to be rude to him. I didn't want to get into trouble if he complained about me or risk upsetting him and having him yell at me. I got up to grab something from the door repair kit and opened it up in the process. He jumped towards the door to close it again and told me to keep it closed. I told him no. I had to open it to start reprogramming it from the front. While I held the door open with my foot and grabbed something from the door repair kit, he started playing with the little wispy hairs at the top of my forehead and tried to touch my shoulder. I swatted him away again and asked him not to touch me and focused on getting out of there. He once again tried to get me to follow him into his bedroom, saying the bed was broken, and I went as far as the door frame to see if I could spot the actual problem with his bed. This is when I realized that he had nothing in his room. No dishes in the kitchen, no shower curtain in the bathroom, no sheets on the bed, nothing. This wasn't his room. My brain once again went back to the international student theory, thinking that he had just arrived today and hadn't gotten a chance to buy anything yet. But in the pit of my stomach, I knew something was wrong. I fiddled around with the door for a few more seconds before announcing that it was fixed and quickly gathered the door kit and left. Before I had reached the elevator, he came back out without his shoes on and followed me. He tried to get back in and get his shoes, but he called out, "Ella, the door isn't fixed. You need to come back." I went back and opened the door manually and told him if the door was broken, I'd have to send up maintenance to fix it in the morning. I knew he was going to follow me to the elevator again, so I closed the door behind me once he went inside and ran down the stairwell as fast as I could. When I got to the front desk, I checked the computer and saw that the room he was in was supposed to be empty. It wasn't a student room or a hotel room. I locked myself in our back office and called campus security. He came down a few minutes later and went behind the desk. I yelled at him to get to the other side and wait, now that I knew he wasn't a resident. He tore the corner off of a slip of paper I had sitting on my desk and drew a flower on it, then put it back on top of my papers. When security arrived, he ran back to the empty room and tried convincing them he lived there so he wouldn't have to leave, which had decided to work on the door again somehow. They escorted him back downstairs and came to ask me if he really did live there. Obviously, he didn't. That's why I called them, crying and terrified. He kept interjecting to argue that he did live there, but he couldn't even recall his room number when asked. Security asked him for his student card and he couldn't produce it, so they told him that he would have to leave if he couldn't prove that he lived here. While they were grabbing his information, I listened from the front office and could immediately tell he was lying. The phone number he gave was just a bunch of random numbers. The name he gave was prefixed by as if he was trying to think of one. When they asked him for his address, he just said, "across the street." One security guard asked if he lived in the apartments across the street, and he said yes, but he couldn't tell them what the building number was. He said his apartment number was 1200, but I moved into that building a few months later, and apartment 1200 doesn't exist. When security asked what his purpose was to be sneaking into a room, he just kept up the ums and uhs and saying he didn't know. They'd ask, "Were you trying to see a friend? Do you know anyone who lives here? Were you here to hurt someone?" And he kept fidgeting and saying, "I don't know, no reason. I was just here." I poked my head out of the office to say that I literally had never seen him before that night. He left. We didn't call the police because he didn't actually do anything, but it was still quite unsettling. Later on, it dawned on me how he figured out that this room was vacant. One of the housekeepers had been using it as her personal break room. A few days later, a housekeeper came to the desk and told me that they found the door deadbolted open, the TV on, and a housekeeper inside watching TV. She must have forgotten to close the door when she left for the night, and when the creep let himself into the building, he found it. I never saw that man again, and to this day, I have no clue what he was doing there. I haven't worked there since last winter, and overnight shifts still give me the heebie-jeebies. Thank you for listening to Whisperwood Stories. If you enjoyed, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe down below. Do you have a story that you'd like me to read here? Consider commenting or sending it to whisperwoodsubmissions@gmail.com. The stories in this video were read and slightly altered with the permission of their authors. Thank you again for listening, and be sure to check out the original Reddit posts. Don't let the shadows get too close.